Okay, so you are going to be out of your notebook today. We're going to be graphing a ton. So this unit is all about graphing. Today we're going to do amplitude and some period changes. Tomorrow we're going to do more of period changes and get you some homework to be doing on your own. Thursday we're going to do horizontal shifts and probably some vertical shifts in there too. Friday's going to be practice type of a day. Tuesday's going to be a station rotation where we're going to do a bunch of stuff. Wednesday, Thursday of next week, we're going to go backwards. We're going to fit curves to scenarios based off of what we can do. And then on the 13th, you're going to take a formative. Then that's going to be turned around and we're going to graph tangents and secants and cosecants and cotangents. And then on the 19th, which is the Thursday before winter break, that is when your graphing trig functions test will be. Okay? So 13 is a formative, 19 is a summative. Okay? Let's get at it. Okay? Now I know this was a while ago. Okay? So we're literally talking, we graphed sines and cosines the last time we had a legitimate class, which was Friday before the Friday after Thanksgiving. So the Friday before Thanksgiving, really. Okay? So that's the last time that we graphed it, and we graphed sines and cosines using spaghetti. You guys kind of remember that? I know it's been a week and a half, but okay, we were using some spaghetti. Okay, and we found that the sine graph looked like this. Okay? We also found that the cosine graph looked like that. They were both very similar, okay, except they started in different spots. So for you, or for us, sine started at 0, 0, and then went up, came back down, went back up, and ended. We just did the first lap. So we did what was called the first lap, which is this right here is the first lap sine curve. Okay? Goes on forever and ever and ever, but we just graphed the first one. Then we went and we graphed cosine, and the first lap cosine curve was right there. Okay? Today, I want to talk about our pieces of 9 that go along with those. Because when we're graphing these things, we are always going to be not only asking you for the graph, but then we're going to ask you for some extra stuff to go along with it. Okay? And those pieces of 9 are relatively, or will always be the same. And for sine and cosine, they are very similar in what they do. So here are the pieces of 9. So we would first ask you, what's the domain? Then we'd ask you what the range is. And then we'd ask you some key parts from within there. For all of these functions, okay, I shouldn't say that. For sine and for cosine, okay, for sine and for cosine, for today and this week, the domain will always be all real numbers. Because sine and cosine.
Okay.
Yep. So for sine and cosine, your domain is always all real numbers. Because you were able to put in all angles all the way through. It was a continuous graph. Okay? So it's all real numbers all the way through. Okay? Looking at the graph, what is the smallest that this graph gets to? What's the lowest value that it gets to? -1. What's the biggest that it gets to? +1. we call those the low and the high. So it has a high of 1, it has a low of -1. If it's got a high of 1 and a low of -1, where's the middle? Halfway between, right? Which is 0. So there's the middle, right? Now that we know how high it gets and how low it gets, now we can do the range. Because the range is from the low to the high. Okay? So now we can say that the range then is from -1 to +1. The amplitude of a wave is also called the height of the wave. The amplitude of a wave is measured from the middle value of the wave all the way up to the high value. And that is the same as from the middle of the wave all the way down to the low value. That is what is called the amplitude of the wave. So the amplitude of this wave would be 1. The distance from the middle to the high is 1. Middle to the low also 1. Okay? When we graphed on the first lap wave, we started at theta equals 0. Okay? That's where we started. And then we ended at at 2 pi. But if you'll notice on the actual graph, we are starting in the middle of an increasing segment. Okay? So we have to go until we're in the middle of an increasing segment again. So if I'm going through here, I come back to the middle here at pi, but that's on a decreasing segment, so I still haven't gotten back to my start value yet. And so then that's why here is the end. So we would start at 0 and end at 2 pi. Now the period, which we'll get to later on today also, the period is going to be the length of the graph where it gets from the start to the end. So to find the length of the period or the value of the period, you are going to take the end value minus your start value. So 2 pi minus 0 is 2 pi. So the period for this one is 2 pi. For cosine, those values are exactly the same, except they're located on different spots on the curve. I will show you. So now on the curve here is my high value. Here is my low value, which puts the middle in there. Don't be jealous of my cape. I swoosh my cape at you. Nope. Pre-calc Unit Circle Project Day. So here would be my amplitude. Here would be my amplitude. Here would be my start. Here would be my end. That's all we graphed on that one. Okay. And just for, so that I fill it in for the notes online. That's all that this is doing. Okay. Let's get into it. The first concept, so what we're going to be doing with those two basic parent functions now is we are going to be transforming them. Okay? And so we're going to add in 4 different values, and those 4 different values will do something to the graph. So first off, we've got our A value. That is going to be our amplitude, and that is going to be our vertical stretch. It's going to shift, or it's not going to shift, excuse me, it's going to stretch it out, or it's going to compact it down. Okay? That's what that A value is going to do. Our B value is going to be our horizontal stretch. We're going to take it and we're going to accordion those two functions. We're either going to stretch them out or we're going to compact them in. Okay? We're going to accordion those values. Yes, no? Kind of. Okay? We'll get to it today. I promise. Okay?
Is it missing a parenthesis? Or is it supposed to be like that?
That one? Okay? Our C value, oops, I already used blue. Our C value is going to be our horizontal shift. So we're going to take the start and we're going to move it horizontally in some direction, in either left or in right. Okay? And finally, our D value is going to be our vertical shift. Today and tomorrow, we're going to deal with A's and B's. Thursday, Friday, we're going to deal with C's and D's. Actually, Thursday we'll deal with C's and D's. Friday we'll deal with A, B, C, and D. Okay? Now, when you go to graph these, we are only ever going to ask you to graph the first wave. The first lap wave is what we call it. Yes, the domain will still be all real numbers. Okay? It'll still always be all real numbers, but we're only going to have you graph one wave, not all of the waves. Okay? So your graphs, for well, I shouldn't say for today. Your graphs are always going to look like this, or they're going to be flipped over. Okay? Because we'll teach you how to flip them over too. Questions so far? All right, let's get into it. The nice part is you can just do all of these just on your own. Okay? So A, as I said, was the vertical stretch. It comes from the amplitude. It tells us the amplitude. So the things that we can get out of it are the amplitude, the high, the low, and the range. Okay. Those things are all partially controlled, if not fully controlled, by the A value. Later on, i.e. Thursday, they'll be controlled by the A value and the D value. Okay? So here we go. We want to graph y equals 2 sine of x. Okay. The pieces of 9 will always be there because, again, as I said, on the 13th and the 19th, we'll have you graph it, and then we'll have you add some of those values or all of those values for each of the graphs. Okay? So the domain, for right now, I shouldn't say for right now, domain is always all real numbers. Okay? For right now, your middle is always going to be 0 until Thursday. For right now, your start is always going to be 0 until 20 minutes from now. No, I lied. Until Thursday. For right now, your end is going to be 2 pi for about 20 more minutes, which means your period is 2 pi for 20 more minutes. Okay? Those are going to be locked in for now. They'll change as we go, as we add more stuff, but right now, those are all going to be locked in. Okay? My A value is 2, which that means my amplitude is 2. Sine curve looks like that. If my amplitude is 2 and my middle is 0, how high up does my graph go? 2? How low does my graph go? -2. Which means my range is -2 to +2. When we graph these functions, we are going to ask that you graph them and label both axes. So I've currently labeled my high, my middle, and my low on the vertical axes. On the horizontal axes, I'm going to label my start, my end, and then I'm going to come up with the other 3 in between. Here, here, and here. Halfway from 0 to 2 pi is pi. Halfway from 0 to pi is pi over 2. And halfway from pi to 2 pi is 3 pi over 2. Okay? It's 3 averages. Start plus end divided by 2. Start plus middle divided by 2. Middle plus end divided by 2. And that's your graph. That's all we ask. Shape, label, label, done. Okay? Questions, comments, concerns, clarifications? Next one is y equals -3 cosine of x. I will tell you that whenever you have a negative value, that you will then flip the graph. Okay? A negative a value flips the graph no matter what. Domain is still all real numbers. Don't know, don't know, don't know. Up middle is 0. Don't know. 0. Pi. What is my amplitude? But I take the absolute value of it because it's a distance, so it's 3. That means that my highest value is 3. My lowest value is -3. So my range is from -3 to +3. With me so far? Okay. Normally, a cosine curve is going to start up high and end up high, correct? But because I got a negative a value, what happens? I flip that around. Yep, I'm going to start low. Go up high and end low. Okay. Now we can fill in. -3 to +3. We can fill in and there's our graph. Questions, comments, concerns, clarifications? Yes, ma'am.
Did you just drop the negative for the amplitude?
It's the absolute value because it's a distance. Okay? You graph that one. Agree? Memorize the pattern. I say this not as a joke. Memorize the pattern. You know what I mean? Cosine graphs are going to look like this, or they're going to be flipped upside down. Sine graphs are going to look like we've done, or they're going to be flipped upside down. Okay? Memorize the pattern. If you get that pattern, you just draw that, and then you fill in the numbers after that. Okay? Try that one. Agree. It's negative, yeah. Okay? Just when you have all the answers, now I'm going to go and start changing some of the questions. Okay? So now we're going to bring in the horizontal stretch, the B, the period change, if you will. Okay? We're going to bring in B values now that will change our periods. Okay? The first thing that you've got to know about the period change is you have got to know this. You need to get this committed to memory. That the period of a function is 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. Okay? 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. The b is going to be the coefficient on your variable after the trig function. So what you know from the start, or what is always going to be the same from the start, now your domain is still going to be all reals. At least for today, your middle is still going to be 0. At least for today, your start is now still going to be 0. That's it with that b. Adding that b value. Everything else comes off of a and b. So the first thing that you should do is you should ask yourself, what is my period? Two pi divided by the absolute value of b is going to be 2 pi divided by 2, which is going to be pi. So my period is now pi, which makes my end become pi. What is the a value in this particular function? 1. So that's my amplitude, which is my high. -1 is my low. Range goes from -1 to +1. Draw yourself a sine function. and then go fill in your vertical values. That's your high, your low, and your middle. We're starting still at 0, but now we're ending at pi. Half of pi is pi over 2. Half of pi over 2 is pi over 4. Halfway from pi over 2 to pi is 3 pi over 4. Questions, comments, concerns, clarifications? Go ahead, Noel. If we didn't start at 0, then we would have to take start plus end and divide it by 2 to get the middle one. We'd have to take our start plus our middle divided by 2 to get this one. And we'd have to take our middle plus our end and divide it by 2 to get that one. Yep. We take 3 averages then. Okay? Good? Try that one. Cosine, cosine. Starts up. Ends up. Half of 6 pi is 3 pi. Half of 3 pi is 3 pi over 2. Average of 6 pi and 3 pi is 9 pi over 2. Questions, comments, concerns, clarifications? All good? Good place to end. Okay. Fiend.